Thanks. I think it's actually going to be John who's starting this meeting.
All right, so I think our first order of business is a roll call. I call the roll. I am John Beeling. I am present. Representative Barber. Senator Barrett. Sharon Byrne Kishida. She's, I believe. If you could say present if I call your name, please. All right. Leanne Cole.
Max Hayworth in Leanne Cole's stead at Community Action Works.
Thank you. Councilor Delgado. Janet Dominance.
I'm here.
Oh, there's Janet. Hello, Janet.
Hi.
Lou Dubuque, present. Magda, I always say it wrong, cards.
Sam Larson subbing for
Yeah,
MassDEP.
okay, that's right. Thank you.
How's it going?
Sarah Kalish,
Present.
Chris Callahan. David Melly. Connor O'Shaughnessy. Andrew Potter. Catherine
Rattay, present.
Rattay, thank you. Bill Rennie. Neil Ryan. Juanita Trabert.
Present.
Tracy Triplett. Abby Webb. I don't think we have a quorum.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
We have 11? Okay, I thought we had less. Okay, so I guess.
And I think just Sharon Kashida, I see you online, but you did not respond present.
Sorry, I was on mute. I said it a couple of times. Present.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, thank you. All right, that's helpful. All right, so we do have a quorum.
I count 8 actually. 9 if we're including Chair Beeling.
Sarah Kalish also responded in the chat.
Yep.
Okay, how about if I read through them one more time from what I have? Lou, Janet, Sharon, Max, Sam, Rattay, Trabert, and Kalish.
Yep.
Yeah. And Beeler, so it's 9. It's funny because I got a message from a couple of people like Neil that he was Brian is gonna be in person.
I wonder, I mean, I still have this down as
It's 10, yeah, that's.
So I'm wondering if there might have been some.
Because I had I know we had moved them, I know the public notice and stuff, and it's really sent out to the commission after that. It may have already been in some people's calendars.
Yeah, it was definitely in mine. So I think we still need 2 people, is that right?
Yeah,
So I think my recommendation is we hold off, if everyone can sit tight, obviously do what you gotta do, but please stay online. And if we can get a couple more people, we'll go forward.
one, I believe.
Yeah, how many more do we need?
Maybe 1 or 2. What's a quorum here, 11?
Well, we have 19.
10 will be a quorum.
I'm texting a couple of them.
So 10 would be.
Okay, so we only need one more. So, yeah, text away, see if we can get.
Reach out to.
Greg, it might be helpful to send an email to the full commission.
Yeah, I'm looking back right now just to grab that original. Can you, you took control of the screen, right?
Yes. Do you want me to
Okay.
stop sharing?
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure I'm gonna get on my email and so I don't wanna.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Oh, I just
Here we
texted you.
go.
Oh, there you go. Texted me.
We're waiting for quorum.
Am I
You're,
We're always glad.
you're indispensable as always, Phil.
Especially now. All right, so that gets us there.
That gets us there.
All right.
Look at you, you're so special.
You gotta give us a new drill.
All right. Having established a quorum, thanks to Mr. Rennie, we'll proceed. I'll just have a little more housekeeping reminder of our staff here. We have Greg Cooper, who's the Director of Hazardous and Solid Waste here at MassDEP, John Fisher, who's his deputy. Courtney Rainey is not present, but she's the Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Government Affairs for DEP. Julie McNeil is our attorney for Bureau of Air and Waste, and Jennifer Hoke, I'm gonna get
Hauk.
better. Hoke is the Vice President of Planning at Green Review.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So just in terms of, we've done the roll call. I think the next order of business is to approve the agenda. Everyone should have received a copy of the agenda. If I can get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
And,
any discussion?
sorry, since I'm not in the room, I can't tell who's moving things.
I'm sorry. Janet Dominance moved and Bill Rennie seconded.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good reminder, since we're hybrid, it would be helpful if folks just identify themselves before voting or moving. Okay, so any discussion? All right, so all in favor of approving, it's all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the agenda for this morning is approved. The next order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Everyone should have received a copy of those minutes. We did not receive any comments on the minutes. So if I could get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So moved.
Second.
Is that Rennie Dominance?
Rennie and Dubuque.
Dubuque.
Sorry, it's okay. They kind of tied. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting we had, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes from our last meeting are approved.
Great.
Now, if we could pull up the mattress PCR policy recommendation. This has been out there for a bit. We talked about it last meeting. Now we're gonna go for having a vote on the mattress recommendation. If I could ask for a motion to approve the commission sending the mattress recommendation to the legislature.
So moved.
Discussion.
Does anyone want to discuss the,
I just want to ask a process question.
yes,
You're saying that this is the policy we will send, or we're doing it like piece by piece, or what's
so we're
the?
gonna be sending, so if you recall, we already sent the paint recommendation to the legislature. So
Okay.
what we're planning on doing, for the ones that we're all, settled on, we're gonna send them in advance. The eventual report will contain all of it.
Okay,
So this is just, we're trying to give the legislature some lead time, if they choose to go forward with preparing or going forward with some of the legislation that they already have, and new stuff. We're just trying to kind of get these things out there. And then in January, we'll have a full report, which will contain all the recommendations on the paint mattresses. So I can't remember, did we get a motion to send this out?
Tashita
Yes,
moved.
so moved.
Karen,
Right.
all
Someone moved on. Yeah, you got a motion.
We didn't second because we were in the discussion.
Okay, so now discussion of sending this recommendation to the legislature.
All right, can I ask who seconded the motion?
We did.
No,
We haven't had.
We have not had a second. I think you need a second before you can discuss.
Yeah, that's.
I can second, this is
Okay.
Janet.
Okay.
Thank
Janet
you.
has seconded. So now we have discussion. Any discussion?
Anita?
Yes, I would just like to touch on this recommendation that from the municipal perspective, it is inadequate to address the commission's task. It does not address specific cost mechanisms or other things that the commission was actually tasked with putting forward a recommendation on. Additionally, S614, the bill that is listed here, is by definition not actually EPR legislation. So I don't know that it should be mentioned as EPR legislation under consideration, but I'm not looking to make a change. I'd like to move forward, but I think we've not covered mattresses in enough detail to do the work of the commission justice.
Does anyone else have thoughts on either what Ms. Traver has raised or any other items they'd like to put on the record?
Well, actually, I have another process question then.
Okay.
Will we have like a minority report? You know, will, if there are people who on any of the policies feel like the commission is submitting it, but there was concern X, Y, Z or.
Yeah, my sense is the final report will give people the ability to put in thoughts. If they
Okay.
have things like Ms. Traver has raised or other points, I think that's fair, right?
Yeah.
That we voted for, so as a commission, this is our recommendation. However, we can raise, some notes, like some part of the full report. But in terms of sending something, to the legislature now, I think it's better to send it and then, I don't know if they're gonna act on these things quickly. I don't have any real sense of that, but I think, it's fair for them. Our task is to produce a report in January. So that's what we're gonna do. We'll send these things in advance so they know what's coming, but then to the extent people want to raise some points about other issues that might want to be, considered in advancing this legislation, I think that would be a fair point. That would be part of the file. All right, any further discussion?
I would, this is Bill Rennie. I would tend to agree that, I'm not comfortable recommending that they enact legislation, given the number of questions I think that are still out there, with regard to curbside pickup and how that would be treated. I mean, we were sending recommendation to enact the legislation, but ask them to consider all these questions, which, these bills are currently before the legislature and they have hearings and they gather information. So I think they're going to be doing that due diligence anyways. But I just think more work needs to be done, and I wouldn't be comfortable recommending that that legislation be enacted until a number of these questions would be answered. And then on the, I mentioned, I think in one of the previous discussions, recognizing the legislation by bill number that's in there. I mean, the legislature is aware of the bills that are before them. And given that we're not endorsing any specific approach, I just don't know that it's necessary.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move to a vote? Okay, all in favor of presenting this recommendation to the legislature, please say aye.
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 Could the folks in the online put it through the chat also?
And
I'll vote yes as well.
okay, those opposed?
No.
I'm abstaining, please and thank you.
Okay, so we have abstention. And we have one opposition. Haven't tallied up the votes online.
Jennifer, do you have a count there on your side for who's on virtual?
Believe so. I have 7 yays. Commissioner Rennie is no. Commissioner Dominitz abstained. Is that correct?
Correct, thank you.
Sure.
I'm a yes too, if that wasn't clear. Ryan,
That's very.
Sorry, who voted yes?
Neil Ryan.
Neil Ryan. Oh, good. I didn't know you were in the room.
Yeah, I just got here.
So that motion carries. And we will prepare the recommendation. We will circulate it for the group when we send it to the legislature. Thank you all. All right, next order of business, we're going to talk about the battery EPR recommendation, which is based upon the presentation we had at our last meeting in July. And here is the draft recommendation. I think everyone's had a chance to look at this. I'll give you a moment right now to take a look, and then we can talk about it.
Commissioner Kalish has her hand raised.
Yes.
I had one quick follow-up question. Sorry, let me know if you can't hear me with the audio, but this was on the mattresses. I was wondering if commission members will also be providing the 1 to 5 scale of agreement as part of the response, or if it was just the I know. I had internally gotten a number, so I wasn't sure if that would also be part of what was shared with legislature.
So today's meeting was really just the up and down vote. We can have a discussion whether we, I think, as indicated previously, there'll be an opportunity when the full report comes in to put in additional comments, concerns, et cetera. So whether we do that via scale voting or just here's my concerns with this, here's what I think legislature should consider. I think that it's fair to put those kinds of things in a full report. But right now, we're trying, for efficiency's sake, we got a lot on our plates, trying to move some things through. People obviously have the opportunity to reach out directly to the legislature for their views, but from a commission standpoint, we're trying to be efficient and kind of move things forward.
Okay, that makes sense. Just one clarification.
Ms. Traver?
Yes, so I disagree with this recommendation. I think that it is pretty clear from the previous meeting that similar to paint and somewhat to mattresses, but especially to paint, PRBA's model, the Rechargeable Battery Association, that they represent battery manufacturers that are in favor of this model. It should absolutely be the model that Massachusetts adopts. It has been well studied. It's been recently adopted by at least 7 different states in the past 2 years. And so I don't understand why that would be a question that would be left lingering from this commission. I think it's very clear and straightforward that adoption of the PRBA model would be the best path forward.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? So I think what we were contemplating for this one was to do some. I don't think we're prepared to move forward with a recommendation today. I think we can do some scale voting on this one, and then bring it back for next month's meeting, and see if we can get a vote on this one next month. So if we can Jennifer, do you have
on the question on should take back programs be the responsibility of retailers or voluntary? Can I answer that question or?
Yeah, no, these were there for kind of discussion.
right?
Yeah.
Like we're trying to want to have a discussion about the batteries,
Okay.
EPR today, and what kind of elements people think should and should not be in there. Obviously, Juanita thinks we should adopt the PBRA's model legislation, but I think, that's what these are there for, to garner some discussion.
Well, my answer to that question, I think, would be no,
Right.
but it could be voluntary. But if it's just for discussion purposes for this meeting, or is that the recommendation I would?
I think we would we're kind of taking a temperature in general on EPR, but then we would like to kind of have some answers to, I think it'd be great if we could get some commission answers, or recommendations on them. So if people are in favor of the PBRA model legislation, and we're hoping that maybe that's, yes, and that I think has a voluntary retailer piece component in it, which maybe answers your question of the second question. So,
Well, I think that, I think we've seen in past presentations, I think even from, Product Stewardship Council, that, the EPR model is for not to have mandatory collection. And it would strictly be voluntary. So I'm not fully comfortable with that question even being in there. And I would be more comfortable with a statement that take back programs should be voluntary.
I think it was in there because there was at least one state that did require retailers who sold those to take it back. So just trying to, the majority of them have voluntary.
Can I speak to that issue?
Yeah.
So in the PRBA model that I have already stated, I recommend that the commission recommends. The collection is voluntary, and I would say like nationwide, even if there is an example of a program that requires take back, that is not a standard and kind of not really a discussion item that is like a hot topic. No one that I know of is advocating for required take back of retail. So I agree that question, it's not even a question. I don't really understand why that was added to this list as like something up for debate. No one's advocating for that.
We'll delete it.
Does anyone want to keep it in? Let me ask you that.
No.
Does everyone feel the same way about this? We'll just take it out if the whole commission feels like we don't need it. Agreed.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
So we will eliminate that question. And how about these other considerations? Anybody have thoughts on any of those? Would you like to get this to a closer vote on this? Other things that people
I'd like to do just a quick run through of those questions if I'm able
That's
to.
fine. Yep.
So should standards be performance, convenience, or both? There could be more discussion of this, but in the PRBA model, it's convenience. And I think that would work, especially to start establishing a program. What size or type of primary battery, like, again, no one is advocating for like only including certain batteries. I would say it's kind of universal that everyone wants all types of the small type of batteries. I forget the name, the category name right now, but rechargeable medium format batteries, I think, would be desirable from the vast majority of municipal and waste collection sectors to get more batteries out of the waste stream. And so it would include all battery types, rechargeable and primary, eliminate the confusion from the public, and collect the small format and the medium format batteries. Because above medium format is where you get into other regulations that make things much more complicated. So medium format, small format, very clear, straightforward. Take back programs we already talked about.
But one question on that, Juanita, I think one of the key pieces of that decision is removable or embedded.
You're gonna get.
Oh, thank you, sorry.
That's why I think we put it on there, because that was heard as, as one of the discussion items.
So it is a hot topic. In the PRBA model, embedded batteries are not included. If we were to make a recommendation that embedded batteries are included, the Battery Association, the PRBA, would be against that model. And so we would lose the support of the battery manufacturers, making it a much bigger, more difficult battle to win. No state has gone after specifically embedded batteries yet, but there's a lot of study and work, and the battery industry is aware of this issue. They want to be able to address it. It's just right now there's too many complexities. It's kind of like whatever version 2.0 of this model would be, would add embedded batteries to it. And another thing that makes it more complicated for Massachusetts is that other states that have passed a battery EPR law have an electronics EPR law in place that captures a lot of embedded batteries. Massachusetts, since we do not have an electronics EPR law, we would essentially end up with more embedded batteries that are not part of the program than other states. So we're kind of at a disadvantage, but that's not a reason not to move forward with the PRBA model.
So I want to make sure Ms. Traber has had her say, but I wasn't sure if the folks online, if you're responding specifically to some of the points she has raised, because we should just do it, and that would be more efficient. I can't see who was first among the two. Jennifer, can you see?
Yeah, Mark Bulish has his hand raised, although this is a commission discussion. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
if you want
Commission
to
discussion. Yeah, we'll get to these. Yeah, we'll get to these after we get to the commission discussion. Okay. So it sounds to me, at least from what I'm hearing, that there isn't much support for including embedded at this point. Is that the sense I'm getting? All right. So do you think should we just take that question out just at this point in time? Maybe come back to it as something. They can obviously come back, or they can do it if they want. But I think for our purposes, I think we'll add that to the taking out the. Well, that was a prior recommendation, prior discussion. So okay, that one we'll take out, and we're taking out the voluntary.
I guess one question, John, is whether we just are saying the commission is recommending legislation that kind of follows the PBRAs.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think we've tried not to be too prescriptive here, but if folks think that, that the PBRA one is really what they should be looking at, we could certainly make that a little stronger. And say, we could say that we recommend you should adopt PBR's model legislation. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I agree.
So we changed the actual recommendation to aligning with programs other states, and add a sentence or comma, and should consider adopting PBRA's model legislation, or just make it that overt. We haven't really done that today. We've kind of been more.
I don't know if that's really necessary, just they've mentioned PBRA's legislation is the ideal right now.
Yeah.
Right now, because it could change.
So we could keep that as a consideration, but not as the actual recommendation. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Ms. Traber?
I believe we did do that for the paint recommendation. We said that we.
You're right. No, you're right. That was,
Okay, so I recommend following that format, and there is precedent for it.
Other than Mr. Dubuque, anybody else not want to put in the overt recommendation of PBRA model legislation?
I just, for purposes of today,
Yeah.
Are we doing just a straw vote?
Yeah, we're not gonna.
Okay, because I might need to get additional.
Yeah, no,
approval. Okay.
we're gonna bring this one back next week. We're trying to square it away as much as we can, which has been very helpful. I think we've made some changes based upon today's discussion.
I would tend to agree with Lou that I think, the language in those first two sentences is strong enough that, you establish a program and to the greatest extent possible, align with existing programs in other states. Again, the legislature is still gonna look at the different models before them. But that's a clear enough statement to me.
Should we take a straw vote on whether to include it overtly in the recommendation? Sounds like we have, so far we have 2 opposed. I'll make sure nobody else who is opposed to including the overt recommendation.
Can I just add that legislators are probably not going to know which one's the PRBA model, and I support what Bill Rennie just suggested.
Yeah, I'd also like to let my support for just the opening paragraph.
I feel like I'm being a process freak today, but if we take a straw vote and then we hear from folks who have their hand up that are not commission members, I might change my straw
That's,
vote. Right?
that's an excellent point. Why don't we complete the discussion, including non-commissioners, and then take a straw?
Oh, that'd be great, thank you.
Doesn't the current bill, the 2 bills that are in the legislature, aren't they the PPRA model anyways?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're seeing right there that, you know, under consideration, but we don't endorse a specific bill. So I think that's fine.
So about the first paragraph, what I don't like about it is that it refers to existing programs, which some of them are much, much older. So I think it should have some reference to most recently passed programs, because that would align with the intention of what this is trying to say. So I think there just needs to be some reference to time frame versus the state, like the word existing.
Should we just reference the states whose legislation we like, rather than other states? Should we just identify specific states that have recently adopted battery EPR?
Yes.
So it would be like aligns with the most recently adopted programs in other states.
Yeah, or such as, the most recent is a little vague.
Yeah, the
There's
New
been a
York
bunch of
model,
them.
the New York model that just passed in June is not like
That's
any of the
different,
others.
that's what I was saying. I'd
Yeah.
rather be a little more specific and say, these are the ones you gotta look at. So why don't we, no maven, so it would be helpful for folks to say, look, these are the ones that are basically PBRA models. You know, I think let's be as explicit without being too overtly prescriptive, like here's what we think you should look at, right? And say, do this, look at that. So I think, do we still have some folks, any other commissioners want to speak on this? Do we still have some folks waiting to be heard online?
Not from commissioners.
Right, I don't know that we need a straw poll. I think that it sounds to me like we've kind of come to a point where this will be circulated again. Right, we'll make some changes based upon today's discussion. We'll put some explicit state references in. We'll send links to the legislation just so folks can see what we're talking about. And then, so we'll make those changes to the recommendation, and then we'll bring this up for a vote at the next meeting. Okay? All right.
But then there were 2 people who had their hand up
Yeah,
earlier.
but they seem to have either been satisfied by our discussion.
Okay.
Well, that was Mark Bullish and Scott Cassell.
Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry, I thought they were, didn't see any hands, so.
There's none.
You have one. Mr. Zotos?
Good morning, everybody. This is Daniel Zotos with Redwood Materials. I believe I did have a chance to speak to most of you folks on a recent meeting. I just, a few quick comments on this that I think remain important on this discussion, just looking at this slide. Well, important. You know, a big mainstay of the commentary I made on the last meeting was that there is a pretty sweeping industry stakeholder-wide conversation happening on this topic across numerous states as well as with the EPA. The EPA is actually convening a meeting in Washington, D.C. today on this topic for 2 days to go over what model makes sense. So I think it would be helpful as a suggestion to consider that while there are some states who have recently moved on model legislation here, there is still a lot of unanswered questions and considerations around independent collection and industry response and critical mineral recovery. A lot of the commentary I brought up on the last meeting that I think should be accounted for. So I know not a commissioner here, just a stakeholder, wanted to make that known that I agree that harmonization across states is important. But I also serve on multiple working groups on this topic as well with various stakeholders that have been working on this very topic in a way that seeks to update or at least augment some of those existing programs in other states to make them work better for industry and new battery stakeholders in this space that are collecting batteries directly from consumers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Scott?
Yes, hi. I am actually also here in DC for the US EPA meetings on batteries. But I wanted to just comment on the embedded batteries and just to say there is an option and for discussion, of course, with the industry to see if there's a way to take the learning from the studies that are being done or study being done and required by 3 of the states and wanted by all states. In the bill itself, you can phase in addressing batteries, so it's embedded batteries, so it's not forgotten, if you will. So while there is no solution that I or probably anyone else can recommend right now, bills can put in a time frame and a phase in for embedded batteries because they are so critical.
Thank you. Any other comments online? Anyone else here in the room? Okay, so we're gonna clean this up a bit. We will recirculate. And I think we're on to our next order of business, which is to talk about electronics EPR.
Okay, hello. Yeah, this is Jason Linnell with NCER. If you'd like me to go ahead, I can get started.
Sure.
All right, so I will just tell you to go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll introduce myself. I'm the executive director of the National Center for Electronic Recycling. We're a nonprofit that started about 20 years ago, where we work on a number of different projects for electronic recycling, both on the collection side and dealing with research and data and projects. We implement the Vermont State Standard Plan as well as the Oregon State Contractor Program. And then there's 2 other models that we'll talk about with the Illinois and South Carolina Manufacturer Clearinghouse programs. So we're involved in a number of different implementation projects for electronic recycling programs under these US EPR laws that I'll go over. And we also do a number of initiatives where we convene different stakeholders, including state governments, affiliates like the industry, the recyclers, the manufacturers, and others to work on joint projects for electronic recycling across the state laws. So on the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about those laws. The US situation is that we've had many discussions, and as Scott will know, we've had discussions for over 20 years now. And I think you heard about those at a previous meeting to have more done on electronic recycling, including at the federal level. Unfortunately, those discussions did not lead to a national program. So we've had the developments at the state levels going back to 2003. The situation today is that we do have about half of the US states with some type of program law, not necessarily all EPR, but we have not had a new state added to that list of 25 in the last 10 years. So on the next slide, I'll show you exactly what the situation looks like. The states in orange have some type of program law for electronic recycling, and that includes 25 plus the District of Columbia and DC. That was the last jurisdiction to pass anything in 2015 and 2014. And so you can see a lot of the coasts are covered. In New England, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire do not have one of these laws, obviously, and then some in the middle of the country, and all the coasts are covered. On the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the progression of those laws. As I mentioned, California is the first and was the only state so far that passed a law with a fee at the point of sale on new devices that are sold mainly for displays. And then in 2004, we had the first state pass an extended producer responsibility law in Maine. And after that, all the states that followed were some variation of EPR. Leading up into 2015, which I mentioned has no new states have passed. So there was a lot of activity in the 2007 to 2009 to 10 timeframe, but not a lot in terms of new state laws have passed since then. But we have seen a number of states adopt and amend their laws since that timeframe. But all in all, as I mentioned, 25 states plus DC and 2/3 of the US population covered by these laws. Next slide. I'll tell you a little bit about how the laws are different because, as you may have heard, these laws are not all based on one single model. They have developed over time based on various models that were discussed many years ago, but then also adapted and changed over time so that we have differences among the laws, including which products are accepted, and I'll go over that, who the manufacturer is or can be, whether it's the brand owner or the importer or some other entity, who can use the collection system or the covered entities, the financing, whether that's a fee like in California or the many different variations of how manufacturers pay under the EPR program and to whom they pay. And then a key fact, there is no single industry organization, no producer responsibility organization that you may have heard about for mattresses or paints or battery. That is something that is may have contributed to the patchwork approaches that we have in the US. So there's no single industry organization that has a model bill that is being introduced in various states. But we do have differences in a lot of different requirements, such as whether there's a pounds goal, whether there's a convenience requirement, or some combination of both under these laws. And I'll try to get into the differences as much as I can on the next slide without going into too much detail, since there are many variations here. But just a little bit more on that PRO discussion. So that first law in Maine, it passed with the first law being EPR, where the manufacturers had to pay for actually their brands that were being returned in the waste stream. And that was what we call return share type program. It has evolved over time since then, but there were discussions of an industry third-party organization like what we have seen in batteries, but none developed. And as I mentioned, those early laws based on return share, when you're doing that type of an approach, every manufacturer's out there for themselves kind of paying for their products plus a percentage of the orphan brands. That means there's kind of a less of a need for a PRO in those early laws. But then those laws have developed a variety of methods since then for manufacturers to comply, but there's no overarching PRO similar to those other industries. Another fact that contributes to all this is that the required cost for manufacturers to cover can vary, whether it's covering all the costs of collecting electronics, the transportations, the supplies, whether that's the pallets and gaylords that are needed to transport electronics to the recycling, plus the recycling costs, and then an overall education program. So all of these things lead to or have contributed to the differences that we see in the laws, including the fact that we don't have an overarching organization. On the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about some of these other differences that are there. The covered entities, this is a key component to decide, and I think has been talked about previously. Who can access the recycling system that you're setting up under EPR? All states cover households, that's a given. So an individual consumer or household is covered. But then there are variations on whether states allow for certain types of small businesses and variations of their size. Schools and governments to participate in the program covered by the manufacturers, nonprofits, and then rarely, but we do have examples like in New York State, where all types of entities are covered, all businesses, all institutions are covered by the program. And that's part of what the manufacturer system pays for under EPR. So the next slide shows you the variations. It doesn't tell you exactly what the variations are because it's too complicated to show, but each color is a different set of covered entities, whether it's households plus schools, households plus nonprofits plus small businesses, many different variations of how who is covered by the programs under the collection systems here. The next slide talks about the covered products. So that's a key distinction as well. What type of devices do you want to cover under the EPR program? At a minimum, all of the states cover only monitors and laptops. There are some states, most commonly TVs are included as well, but they aren't included everywhere. In other states, we see that maximum list there of TVs, all types of printers, computers, small peripherals, large peripherals, and even some cable and satellite boxes, game consoles, things like that that are covered in some of the states with the more expansive lists, but definitely not covered everywhere. Most common 5 covered devices are the TVs, different types of computers, so desktop computers, laptop computers, monitors, tablets would also be included in that, and then printers. So those are the things that are usually covered in most of the state laws, but there are variations of that as well. So on the next slide, it'll show you that same map and the different combinations that we have of covered devices. So each color, again, is a different set, whether it's computers and TVs and laptops and monitors or some other variation of what types of devices are covered. Right. Next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about how devices are collected. So again, each state varies a little bit in the collection method. There are some commonalities across them. Some states more rely heavily on municipal collections, so local government collection sites that are either managed by the local municipality themselves or contracted to a different vendor, whether it's a waste management company or some other type of entity. These are mostly smaller locations, collection depots that have collect electronics alongside many other type of recyclables, and I'm sure that's common in Massachusetts. We do have other states where the dominant method of collection is through nonprofits that are nonprofit retail locations such as Goodwill, Salvation Armies, other types of locations that are collecting electronics and then have retail operations. In Washington and Oregon, for example, these are the dominant methods that we see collections happening there. And then there's other traditional collection methods such as at landfills, transfer stations. Sometimes we see that from electronics retailers, although that's not as common. In the US, Best Buys and Staples do accept some types of electronics in most of their stores. But that's not common across all types of retailers that sell electronics. And then we have other variations such as repair stores are starting to collect. So the places that may repair your phone screens and batteries and things like that are starting to collect more. And then there are some locations like in Illinois where we do have curbside collection. It's not as common and there's some unique challenges to doing that. And then events or staple programs, especially in places where there aren't suitable permanent collection sites. And then there are options for mail-back programs in most states and across the country. They're suitable for certain types of electronics, but not for others. And it does provide an option where there is nothing else in that area for someone to access. Right, the next slide, I'll talk about funding. I can't get into a lot of the detail about how funding operates, and I think you heard a little bit about some of the variations of funding previously as well. We break it down into various categorizations of whether the manufacturer has a fee, like say in Maryland and West Virginia, manufacturers may just pay an annual fee to the state, and then they don't have to do anything else, maybe run a take-back program or a mail-back program. Market share is the most common, so where the manufacturers are paying for they're paying for a portion of the cost based on how much they sell in a given year. And that's usually nationally. It's very hard to get state-based sales. So the most common method we use is looking at national sales. You usually have to convert units of devices into a weight in order to get the market share by weight that you're using to set those shares, because if you think about that, on a unit basis, a tablet does not equal the largest of big screen TVs in terms of recycling costs and burden on the recycling system. So most states use a method of weight-based market share. There are still a few states that have an element of return share, and that's that idea where you're paying for your brand as it's returned into the recycling stream. But that is less common today because it does require a lot more work on the collection site or the recycler side to determine which brands are coming in, who they're associated with on the manufacturer side, and then deal with the orphan devices that are out there, which are brands who no longer have a manufacturer associated with them. And then a newer type of program is a manufacturer clearinghouse that is operating in Illinois and South Carolina, where there is an element of market share and return share that the manufacturers are using to set an overall obligation percentage that each manufacturer has there. It's a sort of a blend between the two and with the formula set in the statutes. But there, it's more of a convenience-based model as well. There's no collection targets or penalties from the manufacturers for not meeting collection targets. It's more having a certain number of collection sites, which I'll get into a minute. And then there's several states that don't specify how things have to be financed. You just need to manage a program and then report on results. And then I think I mentioned this before, but also what is covered by this financing. So it's the law is set up how they're financed, but then what is financed is also a variation. So recycling costs is a given that is covered by all of these programs, but then there are variations of whether the manufacturers or the local collectors are responsible for collection costs, or whether just the bulk transportation and collection cost and recycling costs are covered by the manufacturers, and then some variations on that. And then another key component is whether fees are allowed at the time of drop-off. So if consumers, when they go to a collection site, if they're allowed to be charged a fee to help offset the collection costs, that is allowed in a number of states, but it is prohibited in others, like in Vermont and Oregon and others, where no collection costs are allowed to be charged to the consumer at the time of drop-off. So next slide, I'll show you a little bit about per capita rates. So we do try to collect the overall pounds being collected under the state programs, and then correct that for population so you can see how much each state is collecting on a per capita basis. But there are some key context items to keep in mind when you're looking at the data that I'll show you in the next few slides. The first is that there are no two states with those all the identical factors matching up, whether it's the product types, the covered entities, whether or not they have goals, whether or not they have convenience requirements. So it's very hard to compare, even correcting for population on a per capita basis, whether or not two states can be judged against each other. Another thing to keep in mind is that a higher per capita rate doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing better overall on performance. There can be many factors contributing to that. Like I said, if one state has TVs in the mix and another state doesn't, you cannot compare their per capita rates to each other and say one is doing better than the other. TVs are a huge portion of, still a big portion of the recycling stream that we see coming back. Another thing to keep in mind, this only kind of shows you what is being collected that is being reported under the EPR programs. We don't have data in many states at all about what is happening outside of the system. And even in states where there are EPR programs, there is a fair amount of activity that happens outside of that stream that is being reported to the state. So we only know what's being reported to the states and then reflected under this program here. So that doesn't capture activity outside of the program or non-covered devices. And that can be significant in states that have a more limited scope. And then finally, I'll say I do have some slides on year-over-year change, and that can be impacted by changes to the law itself. So if a new product type or types are added to the program, that will significantly impact the year-over-year change, as well as what happens on the goals side. A number of states have made amendments to their laws to change the formula for the target or increase or decrease the targets that are mandated by the law, and that can also have an impact on the overall pounds per capita. So next slide, I'll show you a little bit about the data here just to compare. This is California, Connecticut, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Oregon. The latest data we have through 2023. We still have a few that are outstanding for 2024. but most are steady or slightly declining year over year on a per capita basis. The highest one being in this range here being the 5 to 6 pounds per capita range of New Jersey, and they have had a pretty steady high per capita or high collection target that's been input for the plans that operate in New Jersey. Other states do not have as strict collection targets. Say in the case of California and Connecticut, they do not have collection targets. California is also very limited in terms of the devices that are covered there. So just to give you a flavor, next slide, a few more states. Illinois has held pretty steady, a little under 2 pounds per capita, and this is going back to the change to the clearinghouse program. Hawaii is one that you see that does jump up because of a change in their collection targets that was required there. But a number of states have seen pretty steady declines, and I'll call out here Vermont, which is a program that we manage. They have had a very good, stable number of collection sites, over 100 collection sites in the state, which is a lot for a small geographic and population state. And we have seen steady declines in the total pounds coming through the program, despite the same number of collection sites and the same number of types of devices and collection targets, which don't really apply since we just have one program there in Vermont. But this shows kind of the decline in the overall mix of devices that is coming back in to those programs and the average weights of the types of the devices that are coming back in. So it goes to show that just looking at the total pounds collected over time, you need to take into consideration the types of devices. Next slide. A couple more states that we have through 2023. And then more.
We're having some connectivity issues, Jason.
Maybe if you go off screen. Right. Austin.
These slides that you've shown, they weren't in the backgrounder that we got.
No, we
right?
got it. We're a little close to that.
Great, okay, thank you.
We're not in the overall package that was sent out.
Can you guys hear me? I'm back.
Yes, we did.
Yep.
Okay, I'll keep video off. I'll hope it be more stable. I'm sorry about that. If you'd like me to, I can keep going and finish the slides. There's just a couple more left.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'll go to the next slide then. Just showing you some of the rates of change. So the next one. So all those show you, this would just highlight the ones where there was a big year over year change. And I guess the highlight here is just to show most states showing a year over year decline. So more bars on the lower end, below 0%, a few on the higher side, whether it's from making changes to their law, to the targets, or to other factors. But in general, the states that have had stable programs, most are seeing year over year declines. Same for the next slide, so go ahead there. Some of the more recent ones through 2023. Okay, let's go to the next one. Just a few overall thoughts here on convenience and then overall in the EPR programs. I think it's been talked about for your other products that you're looking at, but convenience just is how many collection sites or locations or events are needed or required under the state law. And we have a few examples in electronics programs of different types of convenience being required, whether it's a certain number per city, per county, or other geographic region. We also have some based on population or population density in a county or a different region. And then finally, in say the new Oregon program that's being revised next year, there's a requirement for an average distance a resident must be able to travel to get to a collection location. So it has to be within 15 miles of 90 or 95% of the population in the state is another way of doing this. So one thing to keep in mind is how that should be structured. We don't have a sort of standard way yet under the US laws, but we do have some things that you need to keep as a factor in there, such as collection events, recurring collection events, how they substitute for collection locations under certain laws. In some places, as I mentioned, there are no suitable permanent collection sites, so you need to allow for the flexibility of events, but how does that factor into the convenience requirements when they are put into the law? The events can be a substitute. They are sometimes a downside to them being that if you don't, they're time dependent. You don't have someone there at that day, they may miss that time, and we have unpredictable collection volumes with them. And the next slide, a little bit more about a specific convenience model that I mentioned, the Illinois and South Carolina clearinghouse model, and that is the model that we operate for the manufacturers in Illinois and South Carolina, where there's no pounds target, but there is a convenience standard. In Illinois, for instance, it's based on population density. In South Carolina, it's based on a certain number of collection sites per county based on their overall population. A key factor in both states is that counties and certain municipalities can opt in annually to the manufacturer program. And then those manufacturers must provide a program that covers all of the opt-in counties entirely. And they have the ability to do that on their own for all the opt-ins. They choose to operate through a manufacturer clearinghouse, which then divides up the responsibility for all those manufacturers to cover all counties who opted via obligation percentage that I mentioned before. So we do have all manufacturers working through a single clearinghouse in both states, and the manufacturers then contract with different groups to manage for collection and recycling. Our role as the clearinghouse to divide up the state's opt-ins and make sure that everyone is covered on a fair basis and keep track of the data, as well as submit a plan annually to both states, and which counties are covered, which collection sites are offered, and then the total amounts collected in those programs over the course of the year. All right, next slide. So thinking about that convenience approach, what are some of the benefits and drawbacks we've seen? One thing is there's no big swings, ups or downs, penalties based on targets that are set based on sales. So sales can go up, they can go down, they can vary for product types from one year to the next. And we have seen some drawbacks to having the targets based on sales reason. Because that does align with always what's coming back into the collection sites for recycling. This opt-in, this convenience approach, Illinois and South Carolina, does allow for consistent sites for local governments. There's no limits on the pounds being collected. In some states with targets, there's been somewhat of a de facto limit once you reach the target, but in these states, manufacturer programs must cover everything that's covered that comes back into the collection sites. The manufacturers fund all truckload transport and recycling costs. So there's no fees up front on the collectors, but that you can charge at the drop-off. So it does allow those drop-off fees in both states. And then the opt-in allows for flexibility for local governments. If they want to participate in the program, they can, but not all counties participate in these programs, especially in some of the rural areas, and that can leave some gaps that are not covered by the opt-in program. I will say in the clearinghouse models, we do allow for private programs to operate, and there are a number of private programs that operate in those counties who don't opt in. So it's good to look at both the private programs and the opt-in programs to see where the gaps are. But it can be difficult for rural counties to participate in the opt-in program, especially if they don't have a permanent collection site. And in both of those laws, the collection costs are covered by the local government as part of the shared responsibility model that they passed, which is not always possible for some local governments to do to fund those collection sites or the event costs that can be associated with managing a program. So there have been some changes to the Illinois law that allows for some more flexibility on that. But that is one thing that we've heard as a drawback for smaller rural counties to participate. All right, next slide. Just a couple of general thoughts on transitions to EPR programs. I've seen a number of states back when the new laws were being passed in pre-2015, where we have seen changes that have happened once the program transitions to an EPR based model, and collectors and recyclers operating before we have seen some shifts in who you work with, whether the manufacturers and their what we call group plans select recyclers, who they work with may not always match up with who was operating on the ground at that time before the program was implemented. And so there can be some change, and you do have to manage that transition and set the expectations for everybody involved about who is going to be operating under those programs and how it might be structured and what the costs will be covered going forward. Just some things to keep in mind, as we have seen some transitions over the years, and that has caused a little bit of friction on the ground once the changes come into effect. And with that, I think that's the last slide. I'll just one more on key challenges. Obviously a lot of discussion you've already had about this, but what products should be covered? How do you balance the equity and cost for manufacturers, collectors, recyclers, and consumers? I would add in that. What are the goals that you want to put in there, whether they're based on the total pounds being collected, or should it be based on convenience? And then what is that level of cost sharing among the manufacturers, their programs, the local governments, and or other collectors and others that are participating in the program? So with electronics, since we don't have that overarching single PRO, then you're going to be dealing with multiple PROs or group plans, as we call them, since they're not technically an overall PRO. And that requires more oversight to approve and look after the different plans that are out there. It does allow for more choice for the manufacturers, so they're not all having to work with one single PRO. They do have a choice, but there does require a little bit more oversight from the agency to make sure that all the plans of multiple PROs are meeting the same standards. And then finally, we do have overarching challenges regardless of the EPR program on problematic materials over the years. CRT glass has been one that's slowly going away, but it still is there. There's still a good amount coming back into the programs. Plastics, LCD screens, mercury, those are all challenging materials to work with and cause challenges for the recyclers. And then finally, as you've talked about batteries, those are a challenge that for electronic recycling programs. They will be in certain devices that are removable, and then also the embedded battery devices. Those are things you have to decide which should be in and out of the program and how should they be, especially for electronics that may have removable batteries or embedded batteries. If there is a separate battery EPR approach, where is the crossing line? Where's the boundary between the electronics EPR program and the battery EPR program for devices that include batteries, whether they're embedded or not? So I think that was the final slide, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great, so it's time for just clarifying questions. This is just for commissioners, and remember, we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So just actual questions regarding the presentation from Jason. We can do that now. Dominant?
Thank you for that presentation. I look forward to getting the slides and looking them over again. Let's see, how should I ask this? Obviously, we're all here because we want to reduce waste. In this particular area, I can't help but think about our work on right to repair, because there would be just so much less of this waste if manufacturers provided ways to make these products last longer. That is our focus. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to how electronics recycling efforts like your organization does relates to sort of the source of the problem, which is we have too much of this waste because manufacturers keep making these things more and more disposable. I don't know if that's too broad a question or if you can start there, but that's on my mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, it does touch on some of those issues. So just the overall numbers of electronics that are being sold. If you look at that, there is a lot that's out there, and the recycling programs that we have just get at a certain quantity of that coming back in. So there's a lot more that could be recycled, and as you mentioned, if repair efforts are more robust, maybe some of the lives of certain types of electronics can be extended so that they aren't hitting these recycling streams as soon as they are right now. I think both are important. If expanding repair efforts to extend lives of certain devices, but we also need the robust recycling programs, because there are certain types of devices that we see coming back in to these programs today where reuse is just not a viable option, even if you were able to repair them. The markets for reselling certain types of, whether it's the TVs or the old audio equipment or the older computers, it's hard for the recyclers. Once been in a household, definitely businesses are a little different, but if it's been in a household and sat for a very long time, that comes back to the recycling stream, the best is in life, whether it's shredding and separating materials, or sorry, my screen got unstable, shredding materials or sending out the components for resale.
Ms. Traver?
Thank you. Jason, that presentation was great. It did a great job of distilling the complexity of the lay of the land of electronics EPR in the US. I wanted to touch on one thing. You pointed out that the pounds per capita was dropping in these programs pretty much across the board. Do you think that that relates to just overall in the past 10, 15 years that electronics have become smaller and smaller and weigh less and less? So it's not a measure of effectiveness of the program, it's just that the nature of the stream keeps getting lighter and lighter.
Yes, for the most part, I think that's it's the average weight of the devices is less. So if you look at some of the TVs, but also it's the types of devices that are coming back into the system. So the pounds are coming down because the initial pounds were based on very large and heavy cathode ray tube televisions and monitors, and some of the largest ones there can weigh 100, 200 pounds. So if you're getting fewer of those types of very heavy devices coming back in, obviously your total pounds that you're collecting is going to be coming down. So yes, it's the average weight and also the mix of devices that's coming back in as it changes and evolves over time.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions from the commission? All right, I think we've come to our 10-minute break. We will see you at 10:58. We can make it 11. Appreciate that.
Feeling tight.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I ever go 2 days in a row.
It's not my, it's not my thing. Yeah, that's true.
What's the coffee machine, John?
Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know
You don't
why.
have a Keurig, an office Keurig for us? That wouldn't be environmentally friendly. Keurig. The cup I had on the way in just didn't take.
Yeah, great.
Neil, do you guys have a chapter or group in Weymouth?
It's a fledgling group is the answer to that. We do have, it's not well organized.
Okay.
But yeah, is that where you live?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there a problem down there?
Um, just litter.
Yeah, rides on that.
Yeah,
There is a Facebook group, it's a Facebook group or a Facebook page, or maybe both,
yeah,
I
I
forget.
know the town did a birthday cleanup event.
Yeah.
We had, part of our run club, and we did our own we did our running route. We
Yeah.
Picked up on our running route.
Blogging.
And then I'm always picking stuff up when I'm walking my dog. I just bring an extra bag.
Yeah.
And nice and stuff and heavy or bulky.
Well, sign up for the mass litter cleanup crew. We'll send you one of those grabbers,
Yeah.
reusable bag. You can make it easier while you're out there walking the
Okay.
dog.
Yeah.
It's on our website.
Okay.
It's currently no cost. We got a grant, so we're sending them out for free. But yeah, the woman who organized, she has organized some things down there. She tried to get something, and I would set up through this, it's a
I like eight. I think that's a good number.
Chair Beeling, I muted your room because there were a bunch of private conversations going on. So if your room could unmute, that would be great.
Yes, we
Okay.
are mute, yeah. They didn't want the hot mic in the conversation.
You are muted again. If you want to unmute, please. You're still muted, or you are muted again.
We're just waiting on some people.
Okay, thank you.
Are we unmuted? Okay, let's, a
Unmuted.
little bit of housekeeping. I think we still have a couple more commission members due to come in, but it was pointed out to me, I think we did have some folks join a little bit later after we called the roll. So I'm just gonna recall the roll, just to make sure we have everybody in here. I know that Mr. Rennie is here, so we can make note of that. So I'm John Beeling, Representative Barber, Senator Barrett, Sharon Byrne Kishida. She's right there. She's there, okay. Present. Deanne Cole,
Max present for Leanne Cole.
thank you. Counselor Delgado. Jim Dominant is here in the room. Lou Buke is here in the room. Magda Goncarts.
Sam Marks,
Sarah Kalish.
Present.
Chris Callahan. David Melly.
Present.
Connor O'Shaughnessy. Andrew Potter. Catherine Mate.
Present.
Bill Redding's here. Neil Ryan.
Here.
Juanita Traber.
Present.
Tracy Triplett.
Present.
And Abby Webb. So Ms. Triplett, I think you wanted to go on the record about the mattress vote.
Yes, I did. On behalf of the Attorney General, will vote in favor of that recommendation.
Noted. All right, back to
I would, Don, I would also like to vote in favor of that. This is David Malley.
okay, thank you, Dave. All right, back to electronics. And here are the items for discussion. First one, do you think electronic EPR program will work in Massachusetts? Commission members wish to comment?
I guess the short answer is yes. Neil Ryan here, by the way. And, you know, looking at that map in the presentation where they showed all the states with the various laws, including many in the Northeast, kind of shocking to see that Massachusetts is not represented there. So just the big picture, I support this. As far as concerns, for me, convenience is the key for consumers. I know that currently it is somewhat convenient that you can bring things to retailers like Best Buy and Staples at no charge. But then for those items that they do charge a fee, that's where the problems start for many people. It's often adding insult to injury when you're trying to get rid of an old device, and then you find out it's gonna cost you $30 to get rid of it. So I would like to see no fees to the consumers. The companies in this industry are quite profitable. I think they can afford to cover the whole cost of the end of life of their products. And from a selfish perspective on the issue of litter and illegal dumping, we do sometimes see at Keep Massachusetts Beautiful, we do see, people dumping monitors and big TVs and things like that in the woods to avoid those costs. Similar to what happens with mattresses. So I would like to see, the ability to make it as convenient as possible and no cost to consumers.
Thank you. Ms. Traver.
Thank you. So I don't know how to answer the first question, whether it would work or not. It's where there's a will, there's a way. I do think it's needed because the essence of the problem, and Neil just touched on this, is that it is confusing, inconvenient, and often costly for Massachusetts residents to recycle electronics. And that's a huge problem because we all have so many electronic devices in our households, and that number continues to rise as there's more tablets and younger age kids getting electronic devices. It's we can all agree that there's a lot of electronics out there, and that problem isn't changing anytime soon. There are valuable materials in electronics that are lost in the waste stream when these items are not recovered for recycling. There's severe environmental impacts that are happening worldwide from the mining, the mining of these raw materials that could be recovered from the recycling of more electronics. So I think there's big environmental concerns. I think there's kind of common sense concerns on, it feels very wrong to me to put a computer into the trash. But right now, there is no law, there is no ban against a resident doing that in Massachusetts. And that just, it feels very wrong. Like it feels like there should definitely be more parameters in place, regulations in place that would guide more of this electronic material into the hands of recyclers than into the waste stream. From the background document stating that from the 2022 waste characterization study, there was 18,000 tons of electronic waste. That's a significant number. And there is clearly a system set up, not a system. There are clearly electronics recyclers that would benefit from getting that material. But because there's not a convenient free collection system in place that an EPR system would take care of, that's why that material is ending up in the trash. So I think it's very needed. But as Jason's presentation demonstrated, there's no clear-cut answer. Unlike the materials that we saw presentations for or discussed in our past meetings, there is no universal model. There's not a clear-cut, industry standard, industry model. There's not alignment from the industry. From the advisory group meetings, I don't think the industry is in support or thinks that this system is needed, which I can say from the municipal sector, representing the interest of residents and taxpayers, there is absolutely a need for this system. if I could say one more thing. So information that is missing is the costs. So we are working, so I say we, it's the Massachusetts Product Stewardship Council working with the Product Stewardship Institute. We are trying to get more data from municipal governments on their costs. I do have some preliminary numbers that I'm happy to share for a future meeting. I was not able to get it into the materials like in preparation for this meeting. But that's a huge missing component of the equation, is understanding how big that number is, like what the costs right now are for consumers, for municipal governments. You know, it was mentioned that free collection does happen voluntarily at Best Buy stores and Staples stores. There's not a whole lot of those locations across the state, and certainly not convenient to every resident to make it to one of those stores. So I think there is a lot of dependence on the municipal collection network, and it's a patchwork quilt of you don't know what you're going to get. And again, residents are very confused, and some communities offer free collection, other communities it's up to $50. So there's a lot of inequity across the system too.
Thank you. Any other reactions from commission members from really, and you can comment on any of these questions. We have other policy recommendations. It sounds like Ms. Traver does think we need some, we need to look at some other information. I'm curious if other folks have thoughts on that based on what you've heard, what you've seen.
Well, I'm sorry, I will send around and you can decide how widely to distribute it, but I'm gonna keep pressing on the fact that there should be less of this waste to begin with other, I think the policies are related. So we can decide, you can decide how much we should discuss it, but I can't disconnect the two things.
Can I, what exactly is, what categories fall under the current waste ban?
We have a ban on cathode ray tubes, so the old.
That's it.
CRT televisions. There is a ban or a disposal prohibition in our mercury regulations also, which basically prohibits the disposal of mercury containing device. So backlit, you know, that expands to quite a few products. It's, you know, probably, you know, backlit, you know, television sets. Not the LED, you know, LCD, I guess. So there is a mercury containing device ban also. That's much harder for us to kind of define.
Yeah.
We need to know that.
So I guess Jason's still on, correct?
Yes.
So I'm just curious, do you know of the states that have the electronic CPR, how many also have some kind of associated waste ban?
Yes, it's about 19, I believe the last count, 18 or 19 of those states have a ban on either all of the covered devices under the EPR program or just certain ones like CRTs is most commonly, like in Massachusetts, most commonly thing that's banned from landfill for households.
Do you have a thought on whether, you know, there would be a linkage between having a ban and the EPR?
I've seen a number of states when they have passed laws, they have done both. And what they've done, like in Oregon, when we started that program, they allowed the program to start first, and then the ban took effect a year or two later after the programs were in place. And I think that has happened in a few other states as well, but some did them both at the same time, and it can be a challenge to do that. I know in West Virginia, in our home state, they had a ban on certain electronics when the law was first passed, and it was ultimately rescinded after a few years because of some challenges in having enough collection sites and other issues. But that's the only state that has rescinded their ban so far.
Thank you. Any other points for discussion among commission members at this point in time? We're gonna keep going after this. We're gonna open to the public and then we can circle back to the.
Hi, it's Catherine Ratte online. I wanted to respond to Mr. Ryan's comment about let's not put a cost on the consumer for this. I just want to be careful about that because we know that the producer is going to pass the cost onto the consumer in some way. And so I just don't want it for us to put, some rule on it that says we can't publicize how much this is costing, and then they bury the cost, and then there ends up being a weirdly high cost burden because it's not visible how much it's costing for materials to be recycled.
Hi, Tracy Triplett from the Attorney General's office. I was wondering, this came up during the presentation, and I suspect it's quite varied as with everything in the context of electronics EPR. How many states who have EPR programs for electronics have attempted to coordinate with battery EPR programs? Or are there particular states that we should or could look at to understand that type of coordination or very possible for this?
That's for you, Jason.
Okay, yeah, just making sure. I would say it's still very new, especially with the newer battery EPR laws that have been passed. I guess the most recent example is California. They did take on the embedded battery devices and made them part of the electronics program, but that's the program that is funded by a fee at the point of sale. Some of the other states like Vermont is an example to look at. So we operate the electronics program. Called Recycle operates the battery program, and that's being expanded now. And there's some overlap, but there really are two separate programs right now. So I think there's more work to be done. Mostly they're separated. And what they'll say is like, if anything is covered by the electronics program, like for instance, a laptop is covered by the electronics program. It is not separately covered by the battery program, even though there is a battery, in some cases removable, some cases not, inside of that laptop. So I think that's where we've come down on it so far, but I think there's more work to be done, especially if we expand the number of battery containing devices that are included in the battery EPR programs.
Thank you. Ms. Kramer.
Wanted to address the concern of consumer price going up. The recycling costs for any of these materials we've been talking about is pennies on the dollar of the original purchase price of one of these items that we're talking about, one of these devices that we're talking about. There's no evidence or documentation from any of the states that have an existing program that there was an increase to consumer prices versus other states. All or the vast majority of major electronics brands are certainly nationwide, if not global. And so it's not going to raise, the cost of a cell phone by $20 or something to bake in the cost to recycle it. So I just wanted to clarify that that's always raised as a concern, but in these systems, there's a lack of evidence that there's actual increase to consumer prices that you would be able to attribute specifically to an EPR system.
Thank you. Any other comments from commission members before we go to the public?
I think, for our members, we've never wanted to follow the California, the first state with the advanced recovery fee. We've always been in opposition to that approach. And I think, our comments to the legislature over the years on the different e-waste bills were always, whatever you do, don't interrupt or don't derail the existing voluntary programs that are in operation today with a number of retailers, a few of them who have been mentioned. There may not be, there probably isn't enough of those stores. We'd like to have more. But those programs should, I think under any system moving forward, those programs, which are very popular with consumers and have worked in, collecting and recycling significant amount of material, should be allowed to continue.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're gonna move into the public comment session. I see Scott Cassell has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to participate here. Just wanted to hit on the voluntary collections. I agree that is very important. I did mention, I might have mentioned this before, but about 15, 20 years ago, I did work with DEP in 4 other states and with Staples to do the first computer take back in the United States, which is when the EPR laws did come into place in other states. They became part of the collection infrastructure for that greater convenience. So I very much agree with that last comment. Just in terms of what Juanita had mentioned, the way that many people think about these issues of costs and how they're, what the consumer pays, I think that the overriding issue for all of EPR is that it's considered as a cost of doing business. And it's very hard to separate out the cost of gas, labor, all tariffs, all the different things, and the little bit for this and a little bit for that. I think it's an ongoing issue. I think packaging, it's been an issue. It's not proven or disproven at this point. It's like, how will these costs be covered? And the consumer fees have kind of come out of favor, and partly because the retailers also don't like those, particularly the advanced recycling fees. Just lastly here, in terms of batteries and electronics going together, yes, they very much do, but as was mentioned before by Jason, that the time frames for them is a little different. In the beginning, there was the first 8 years from 2000 on, it was electronics, and that was the leading issue for the DEP and others around the country. And many of these laws were developed, the 26 that Jason mentioned, and then it kind of quieted down, and now it's starting to come back up again. And batteries, they had a different horizon in the US. I'll tell you what, though, that the state and local governments managing these have always worked on the two together. And so I think now you'll see that there's a lot of lessons learned that we can convene on and take some of those lessons back and forth with electronics and batteries. And I think that the convergence will be happening at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Are we moving to public comment?
Yeah, we're at public comment.
All right.
So as stated, could you state your name and affiliation, and then try to keep it brief. I think Jeremy Jones has his hand raised.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yes. Hi, Jeremy Jones. I'm with the American Coatings Association, but also just wanted to speak as a former employee of an electronics company in the United States who work closely with Jason as well on implementation of product stewardship programs across the country for electronics. I can kind of quickly state that the cost of the EPR programs do get passed back to the customer. It's really just a matter of, how much. And I was personally in charge of the allocation of costs to specific product lines to ensure that those costs were reflected in the products in those business units. I do agree, though, with generally speaking, that it is a diffuse cost, but I think that's only because a few certain states have EPR. If it were sort of nationwide, et cetera, it would absolutely reflect. It just seems to be that, that I think it does go unnoticed by the customer, but it definitely does reflect in higher costs.
Thank you. We have other comments from the public. think we've got some discussion items teed up next. Types of things so I think overall, just kind of correct me if I'm wrong, we've obviously been kind of moving upwards in terms of degree of difficulty, right? I think the first three, we've kind of banged them out pretty well. This one strikes me as trickier and more complex. It seems like there's a lot of uniformity. But I think these are the types of things we should be doing. Like, what are the types of things we want to see covered? You know, take a look at other states. Kind of, it looks like there's a wide variety in terms of that issue. What are we talking about here? You know, what the end of it, who we think should be covering this? What's the funding source? And then, you know, what are we looking for in terms of the program goals? So, do we want to like just kind of go through these and talk about which ones we want to keep talking about? In my own sense, just speaking, you know, informally, I think it's going to be tough to come together with a coherent recommendation without a lot more time. This one seems like it's going to be hard. It just seems like something we might want to have a pretty robust discussion, put a lot of stuff in the report, and then kind of move it on. And there's things we could do here at DEP to help further this discussion. And that's one of the things we'll talk about. We can help. Like John and Greg have a group that they already exists. We don't need to come up with a new group, but we can keep talking about this. But this is my general sense. So does anybody disagree with that? Anybody think that we can kind of crank through this and come up with something fairly coherent like we have in the first three categories, or am I missing the boat?
No, I would agree with you. I mean, you know, two advisory group meetings and this meeting, you know, 6 hours of discussion. It is a very complex topic. I mean, with no uniform approach, you know, no central PRO in any state. I think there's a lot of remaining questions to be answered. I think you're on track, Jim.
So in terms of I guess, looking at other states, does anyone have thoughts about states that they look at and say, this one seems to be working the best? Does anybody have that kind of opportunity to delve into it? I haven't really been able to participate in the advisory groups. I was just curious if anybody said, yeah, the way Vermont's doing it seems to be working, or not working, or I'm just curious if folks, that's a lot of our work has been informed by other states, so I'm just curious. It seems like this is a pretty eclectic, right? And there's not like a one size fits all, but if anybody has thoughts on other states that we should be looking to, yeah, we could say that, like, we're not going to come up with a firm recommendation, but eventually in our report, we'll say, these are the states that we've looked at and we think they seem to be achieving the purposes more effectively or efficiently than other ones. Does anyone have thoughts on that? I don't know enough about it.
Well, I just say that, you know, there's a couple things that I think we probably could, like, certainly, from what Jason described and what we maybe heard, you know, market share is predominantly, you know, 12 versus the other 3 or 4 states. So I mean, there's some directions that we can kind of go in, and then whether it's performance or convenience, it seemed like the performance is really kind of hard to calculate, as he was describing, and the convenience piece is probably a better measure of you know, providing that access. And then I think the other piece would be you know, covered entities and the product categories. The product categories in particular, to me, seems like, I think, from the neighbor relationship in New England, that probably would be something to get a good feel for, like, or maybe maybe Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island are all over the place now anyway. I, you know, haven't looked at the details on that, but if there is some consistency there, that would probably make sense, you know, given the size of New England states.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, did Trevor, do you have your hand up, or did you put it down?
I put it down.
Okay. So any issues that we haven't covered that folks are interested in, anything else that we should be looking at? additional information. I think, we could keep studying this for a long time, is my general sense. I think the most efficient thing to do is Greg suggests, let's look at our neighboring states' laws. We should look at that as part of our final report. And just look at them and say, here's how they're doing, here's how they work. And we can reach out to them and say, what have you identified? They're pretty mature. The newest one's 10 years old, so I think we've got a pretty good sense of how things are working. I did have the same question that Juanita did about, why we've seen reductions, but that's interesting, right? You think about it, everything's getting smaller. I think that, it's probably not participation, but that's the way we track these things. We don't do it by email, we do it by weight. So it seems like it's still working, notwithstanding the fact that the numbers, the weight numbers are going down. So, I don't know that we really have anything to vote on today. I mean, we could do, I mean, my own sense is I'm sorry, yes. Ms. Baker.
So I was just reviewing the original law that established the commission and kind of what the tasks of the commission actually are, which was what I was trying to express my frustration with the mattress recommendation, because I don't think that we actually fulfill that charge. I think with electronics, we do have an opportunity to revisit what the tasks are for the commission and come up with, I don't know if it's some proposed, similar to what here the potential program parameters are, but some like a draft of like what different parameters could look like, perhaps for future discussion. I don't know if there's any appetite for additional advisory group meetings for this material type. But looking at what the commission is supposed to be doing, I would love to see this group take the opportunity to fulfill the charge. So it's deciding on, or making a recommendation on a proposed structure for each product, including collection, processing, and financial responsibility. Information on cost impacts of residential curbside collection or transfer station operations, on-site processing costs for each readily recyclable material, addressing Janet's concerns earlier. One of the things that we were supposed to look at is methods for incentivizing product and packaging production, including material reduction, reuse, and life cycle extensions, and then the overall impacts on waste generation and waste stream contamination reduction. I don't feel that from this conversation we've accomplished that. And I would really like to see that come out of this commission, particularly for electronics where there's not a model that exists. This could be done by taking the existing bills that were included in our prep materials and, just deciding, oh, the parameters that are recommended here, the commission agrees with or not. I know that we wouldn't be able to do that in a line by line sense, but I think in these fundamental aspects of a program that have been outlined on this slide, like the covered products, covered entities, program funding, program goals, like I think we could establish that and then actually fulfill what the task of the commission is.
But just to be clear, I don't view the recommendations we made thus far as fulfilling our obligations. Those are preliminary recommendations based upon what we've seen. It's an opportunity to identify bills that, in our view, meet the requirements of what we're looking to do. The final report is going to be very robust and very detailed to go into all of the various facets of what the charge is. And this commission will have an opportunity to review the draft of that report, and we'll go through things line by line and say, this is why we think this should happen. So I'm kind of trying to balance efficiency with thoroughness, and we will have a very thorough final report, which will hit all those buttons. But the legislature's already been looking at a lot of these things for many years. They already have bills. And, you know, we didn't really want to write a 10-page letter saying, here's why we think you should do this. So you've got a bill based on what we've seen, these are good bills. So that just to make clear, this is not, you know, we're not gonna just push those things together. So this is the report. The report's gonna be much more detailed. So we'll have an opportunity to review all the information on all the products. It'll be a little bit redundant for the ones we've already recommended, but we'll do it. And these ones, you know, this one, I think, I'm just trying to figure out, is there more information? I think we've got a lot of information. I don't, if people think like, look, we really need to look at this, or that, let us know, and we'll look at it. But the goal is to issue this report in January, which we're gonna do. And, you know, it's my job to make sure it fulfills all of the statutory obligations. So we'll get that done, but I just really wanna be efficient. And, you know, I'd love to see some of these things move. Like, I think Neil said, it's a little bit embarrassing to see these maps, and there's this void for all DPR, you know? I mean, come on. This state should be doing better. So I would like to kind of get ahead of that, and then some of these things I think are gonna take time. But I don't want it to take 10 more years, you know, it's just. So that's my perspective on that. But it kind of brings me to another question, which is I think we're probably gonna need to put at least one more meeting on the calendar. We're not gonna have time. The next meeting is gonna be talking about what we can say about this, hopefully finalize the battery recommendation, and then go through packaging, which is also fair. That's a hard one, right? That one, just like this one, that's a hard one. So it's gonna take some time to kind of formulate our thoughts on that. So I think in order to give my staff who have lots of work, time, and you know, their consultants to put together a draft and have time to review it. I'm thinking we're probably gonna have to sit down in December and hammer this thing out. And I know it's a terrible time of year, but it is what it is, right? I'm not sure the precise deadline. I think it's mid-January.
It's January 16th.
Something like that. So we're not gonna have a ton of time. So.
Do we have another meeting on the calendar right now?
No, we don't. We need to get it scheduled. So I think we'll send out a poll.
And we have the October.
We have October.
Yeah.
October's for packaging. So I think we need to have one more, just to review the report, because the report needs to issue in January. And that's gonna, hopefully, you know, I can't predict 100% agreement on things, but, you know, fulfill our obligations and then take it from there. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there, you know, try to make it so it's not too late in December. Things get really wacky, so let's try to, I'm thinking early December. And, but that puts a lot of pressure on us, frankly, to get the draft together. So we're gonna pull together all 5 categories, put together recommendations for all of them. We've already made recommendations to the legislature, but we, you know, we need to put more, you know, detail into all of those specific aspects of the recommendation. That's gonna take some time. But my goal right now is to make sure if there is other information that we're not looking at on this particular category, now's the time, let us know. But I feel like there's been 2 advisory group meetings. We had today's meeting, we had the presentation, we have a lot of data, a lot of information. And my gut is we're not gonna be able to say, yeah, this is the one right here, do this one. Yeah, unlike paint, which was pretty, we started easy, right? Okay, any other thoughts?
Well, I think it just one from when we looked at this originally, some of those requirements from the legislature to identify are not accessible. I mean, unless you want to spend a huge amount of money trying to survey and account for everything, you know, cost impacts and you know, that will be hard. We can put it in some, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be exact, but we can kind of make some estimates about what that impact is based on the data we have, but it's
level of precision won't be right.
There's some asks in there that were kind of not really based in kind of.
That's fair. I think we put some caveats and say this is based on certain assumptions that we just sort of give ranges. We'll do our best, right?
Yeah, there's an on-site processing costs piece. So it's like, okay, well, I know how much a processor asks to get paid for this material, but I don't know exactly what that what he's paying to process. So it's it makes it, you'll have to caveat some of this.
That's fair, yeah. absolutely. I don't think, yeah, it's a big ask, and they weren't given a whole ton of time, but, you know, my sense is there's enough existing information out there on several of these product categories that we should be able to say, you should do this. And some of the other ones, I think we're gonna be like, you know, I think the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is one option to take these up. Right? They already have professionals working on this, so it's not really.
And we have a project currently underway where, you know, through one of our grant programs where they're assessing municipal costs of a variety of these products. So that, for that.
A variety of what?
Costs for municipalities to manage these products is one of the tasks in that, but they haven't gotten started, so.
But when you say these products, do you mean like everything we're discussing or just?
Yeah, Raj, maybe Juanita can remind me, or Scott can remind me, like it did include batteries and mattresses and but I can't.
I think it's everything except electronics.
Everything except electronics.
Did you have another comment?
I did. I wanted to, I guess, thank you for clarity on kind of what your vision is of how this process will advance. I do have certainly concerns about the packaging meeting on October 29th, because that's, so like, this was complicated, talking about electronics, times it by 10 for packaging. I mean, it's just so far reaching, and the breadth of the scope is just enormous. And it's also, I always call it the big fish. Like, it's what kind of all of these systems are leading to, is like moving toward EPR for packaging. So it sounds like you see a need for at least one additional meeting that hasn't, other than the one that's been scheduled, in order to review or discuss a draft of the recommendations report that would be submitted to the legislature. But is there not, I don't know, and then is that like the end of this commission, or like what is kind of the vision for the future, or like what have, you know, is there anything after that?
I mean, there hasn't been any final decisions. I can tell you that this endeavor cost this department a great deal of money. And keeping it going forever, it's money that's not allocated. So it would be very challenging for us to keep this as a body without more resources. I mean, these guys have very busy jobs. They have a lot to do. This is going to be a real effort to get this thing done. So I can't say that a final decision's been made. I'll talk to my commissioner. But that has to be part of the consideration. You know, we have, like I said, we have an existing body that works on this stuff. And folks, this is their job to work on this stuff. So I don't want to say, and I'm not sure it's entirely up to me, like where we go from here, but just to give you a sense, I mean, we're stretched, and, keeping something going ad infinitum without, funding it is very hard for us. So we need to kind of make a decision on that, but I'm not saying it's been made.
So I can certainly appreciate that. I fully understand it, especially, like basically the task on to DEP from the law that was passed is its own unfunded mandate. So you just referenced something. So you said an entity that already handles this. Are you referring to the SWAC?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something they can pick up.
So is like there a possibility or discussion happening of like a subcommittee of the SWAC being dedicated to EPR?
I think what we're kind of looking at, we have to come up with a report. Obviously, we got to submit something to the legislature to say, this is what the commission looked at. If in that is some reference like, well, this needs to be looked at further, and a body that, in order to say that we're going to try to work in that further, it would make more sense to move it into the solid waste advisory committee and try to establish a working group that's talking about that issue versus, this is not, I mean, this is great, commission's great. Public notices, public meetings, documents, look, you know, it's a very much more formal process, requires us to have facilitators and AV component people, and we're an outside consultants helping to do that, to do some of the work. So I think we could attack some of the problems which I anticipate will be in the packaging piece, which is a lot of just like, how do we get the data? What's the information? What's, you know, what's the approach that we want to take? It would be probably better suited for, you know, for movement, you know, to the SWAC advisory committee, yeah. So, and I don't know whether we can commit to that now, but I think when the report comes out and we see what we're actually saying may need further work, we can then kind of, you know, take an honest look about the ability to kind of push some of these things forward. You know, the ones that we haven't made more formal recommendations to the legislature.
And
Helpful to hear, thank you.
the SWAC is an open body, open process. Anyone can participate, correct?
Yeah, fully open to everybody.
Haven't been in a while.
Yeah, it's okay. We have advisory committee members, but it's advisory, so there's not a formal vote type of process, but I mean, everyone's always welcome to join and actively, you know, participate in the from the committee to all the subcommittees that might be addressed. And we participate in those. That's just Janet.
I see David Millie has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to DP sort of capacity, timing concerns, but it's my feeling that I would strongly like this commission's final report to have as few let's keep looking at this as possible. And so I don't know, I mean, for specifically for packaging, but I think there are obviously other product categories where we might want to think about this, is like whether it is looking at, you know, I'd rather have a delayed final report that is actually as specific as possible, versus a lot of kicking things over to SWAC or saying this merits additional consideration. So I don't know what and I'm sure ultimately it will be a bit of a balance between, you know, what we can get consensus on versus what is still needs to be investigated. But whether that's bringing in the SWAC early or thinking through like how to maximize offline work before the final commission readings and recommendations, I really strongly urge the other commissioners, but also DEP, to just try to not have this final report be full of, well, let's have another group look at this, or the legislature should consider these questions that we couldn't reach, you know, a conclusion on. I think that doesn't help anyone, to just kind of hand something over that has as many open questions as before.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, I think we have.
Any comment?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Sharon.
Are you talking to me, Sharon Kashida?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, well, I appreciate what David just said. I agree. I also would applaud that MassDEP would be talking about EPR openly and among themselves. I think that would be a giant step forward. And maybe I'm going backwards on this conversation in asking this question, but since there has not been an electronics bill passed in 10 years, and I did not serve on the breakout on the committee that studied this, the subcommittee that studied this, but is there, or are the two bills that are, if anyone knows, that are currently before our state legislature, are they modeled on the best of the best right now? And again, maybe this might be a question for Jason or Scott if they're still here. to me, that just seems to be a lot of missing pieces in the legislation.
I mean, I could just say that I haven't gone over great detail, but I know that it was a 2021 or pre-2021 version because it has a 2021 implementation date in it, so. But I think there was, the previous ones had language about a kind of credit sharing where one company grabbed enough, a certain amount of material, they could sell it to another company that hasn't met it. And I was kind of going, whoa, sounds like a, kind of greenhouse gas emissions inventory calculation. I was thinking that's could be a very complex. So I take a deeper dive into it, which I just started last week when I got back from vacation. And but it consistent, another point is like it says everybody's eligible, in terms of businesses and not just like it says on their, governments, households, schools, maybe. It has, all entities would be eligible. So it's not, I didn't see it consistent with those main 15 or so state electronics that Jason kind of mentioned. It had some outlier components to it.
Thank you.
This is Jason. I'll just add briefly, I do have to run, but I have not looked at those bills in a while. I think they were developed off of more the model that the PSI had been working on, if I remember correctly. There are some other, not based on a model of some of the other states exactly, more elements from other states. But yeah, there is no real model bill to base things off of right now, but I'm sure Scott can fill in a little bit more. And thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think because the state laws came into effect, over the course of the 10 years prior to 10 years ago, I think, you're gonna have a variety of what some might consider best of the best might, I might disagree. I might have a different one that I would consider best of the best, so.
Just stepping way back, he mentioned that no new bills have been passed in 10 plus years. Does anyone have any input as to why that, it suddenly makes it look like there was a lot of momentum and then it just stopped?
Scott might have some thoughts on that.
Quickly here, since I wasn't going to talk, but since my name was mentioned, first of all, the reason I think is because the states that had been following this very closely from 2000 have laws. They followed it, they worked it through, and then, as we know, there's many other products that are a problem in the waste stream. So they moved on to other products, and some are now, over the past 5 years, have begun to revise their laws and bring them up to speed. In terms of Massachusetts, we did we did not drive any of those bills. We were asked to comment on them by bill sponsors. We did for several years, and I can say for the past year or two, I don't recall being that involved in it. So I don't want to take ownership over what's there. I myself want to take a look at it again. I think the biggest thing is Massachusetts is in a certain place. You have a waste ban, you have a lot of experience in Massachusetts. What would an EPR law do for Massachusetts? And what are the advanced elements that we're seeing around the country that can actually be possibilities for implementation in Massachusetts? And how far can you go from where you are now? I think that's really the analysis that needs to take place and the discussion. And I think it's necessary. I think that something can take place here with electronics that is more than what you have, but it will have to be crafted by the stakeholders moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other thoughts? Okay, so I think I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.